I'm going to get into this, but this is the Democrats caved and thankfully were willing to open the government. But it was like what 40 goddamn days during the government shutdown, and it showed that a lot of them were more interested in more interested in like politics than they were starving people in their own parties. But after all the key elections that they won, every they finally reopened the government and bullshit. Let's get into this.
Welcome back to Rising. Niall, what's in your notes today?
Well, I'm glad you asked, Robbie, because after you taking on the president over tariffs from your chair, it's time for me to take on the Democrats over healthcare from mine.
Yep.
Not all Democrats, to be fair. I'm talking about the 8 Democratic senators who caved shamefully last night.
Not shamefully, not shamefully. They did it because their people needed help. And airports were shutting down, major government functions were down, and they couldn't just let that shit go on as long as possible. Now, they did the right choice. They did the right choice.
Handing the GOP a big win on the shutdown,
Mm-hmm.
and, more importantly, failing to put up a fight for their own constituents. So let's flash back to a moment of optimism for Liberals and the left just 6 days ago. Last Tuesday, Democrats won big victories across the country. Zoran Mamdani won election as mayor of New York City. Abigail Spanberg.
Oh yeah, that one was, to be honest, that one was pretty expected, but he charged $13 for drinks at his party, and he's unsure if he can raise the minimum wage to $30. Not only that, but the majority of his voters were white liberal women, and he wants to get rid of all prisoners in jail, so we're gonna see how that goes, but I've been seeing a lot of good news for Florida, at least. Like, a lot of money is entering Florida because of this.
Coasted to victory in Virginia. Mikey Sherrill defied predictions of a close race for governor in New Jersey, winning by double digits. Democrats even won some lower profile elections in Georgia.
Yep.
The message of all that was clear. Democrats were putting up a fight against an unpopular and extreme president, and voters liked it. Last Tuesday's results also lifted Liberal morale, but the respite lasted only 5 days.
Yep.
And you can thank those 8 Democratic senators I mentioned for that.
Wow, wow. They were more willing to let their people suffer than they were happy about winning those elections that were in deep blue states that were pretty much guaranteed Democrat.
The awful octet caved without winning any meaningful concession on the central issue of the shutdown. And that central issue, as I mentioned, is healthcare.
Oh, okay. Let me tell you guys about this. Here's my simple perspective, which is the majority of healthcare costs is related to all the garbage we eat. So if we don't fix our food and like what chemicals and poisons we have in it, then healthcare, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter fixing healthcare. That's the last thing we should be worrying about. The first thing is getting rid of toxic stuff in our food, fixing it so that it's healthy, fixing it so that it doesn't give people health problems. That's number one. That's number one because great, if you get healthcare but you're putting trash in your body, it doesn't matter how good your healthcare is because you're treating your body like trash. So guess what? You're not going to be happy when you have trash results that are expensive. That's just my thing. It's like so simple. The food, the food you eat, and if you exercise are the biggest factors in like lowering healthcare cost. And that's what I think. So before any of that happens, it has to be those two. It has to be done by the person's perspective. And I think a lot of these stupid ass movements, like you know what I'm talking about, like fat acceptance and all that shit, have done terrible damage to people. Because it basically is like, oh, it doesn't matter what you eat, how much you do this, how much you do that. You're beautiful just the way you are, and then they die at 22 years old. That's what needs to be fixed first before we ever talk about healthcare.
The whole entire point of the shutdown, from a democratic perspective, was to extend important subsidies for people buying their health insurance through the Affordable Care Act's exchanges.
Oh wait, one more thing. Also, the Affordable Care Act, most people don't remember this, but Obama forced you to, if you didn't have health care, pay the government money for not having health care. That was also another part of the act, which was a piece of shit move. You shouldn't be forced to get it if you don't want to get it, but it's basically their version of universal health care, except it's fucking trash. In fact, a lot of countries' version of it is trash.
And now, after about 40 days, Democrats have given up. The enhanced subsidies will expire, and that means premiums will go up, doubling or tripling in price for some. The poorest will be hardest hit. People struggling to get by on a household income of $28,000 will have to pay more than $1,200 a year extra for their health insurance. People on $35,000 will see a raise of almost $1,600. Those figures from the Kaiser Family Foundation. Another reputable research organization, the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities.
Oh wait, one other thing about healthcare too is what I don't like is that you get grouped up with certain other groups of people. Like there are certain people that make the cost more for everybody else, and I don't like that aspect of it. It's not all healthcare, but some of them is just have like you know.
Puts it another way. It says more than 4 million people will lose insurance coverage in the Obamacare marketplace completely. That, in turn, is part of a broader grim picture where the CBPP expects about 15 million people to become uninsured over the next decade because of these changes, as well as other Medicaid cuts in Trump's big spending bill earlier this year.
Yeah, Medicaid is a huge factor in like a huge portion of the government budget goes into Medicaid, and it's fucking huge. But the thing that should be cut is all the scammers and people taking advantage of it just because they can. That is the biggest factor in it. That's the biggest cut that I would personally agree with.
Make no mistake, Monday was a grim night, not only for the Democratic Party, but for the voters who depend upon it. Here's Bernie Sanders summing things up.
Tonight, 8 Democrats voted with the Republicans to allow them to go forward on this continuing resolution. And to my mind, this was a very, very...
Don't never trust Bernie Sanders. I still remember like a few videos ago when they were talking about the government shutdown and government senators not needing to accept pay during it. And he was like, no, because a lot of them are new and can't afford to go without getting paid. I still remember that shit, Bernie. I don't trust any word this man says.
Bad vote. What it does, first of all, is it raises healthcare premiums for over 20 million Americans by doubling, and in some cases tripling or quadrupling. People can't afford that when we are already paying the highest prices in the world for healthcare.
Sanders also talked about the bigger political picture.
As everybody knows, just on Tuesday, we had an election all over this country. And what the election showed is that the American people want us to stand up to Trumpism, to his war against working class people, to his authoritarianism.
Oh yeah, this is another thing I hate about him. It's like, oh, authoritarianism. You literally voted a guy who wants to take over every apartment in New York, make all buses free, and take all the money from millionaires in New York. Like you like that's literally authoritarianism. I swear, this is why I can't respect Bernie. I never respected him. I never will.
That is what the American people wanted, but tonight, that is not what happened.
A Democratic Party that was on a high just 6 days ago is now in this kind of dismal uproar over the vote. California Governor Gavin Newsom responded with a one-word tweet: pathetic.
Gavin Newsom, you should be looking at the $200 billion deficit you have every year. Like you should not be, this guy should not be talking shit. Out of all the Democrats, he should not be talking shit. Like if you really want to talk shit, fix your state first. Fix your state first. Fix every problem it has before you even bother talking shit about somebody else. Hell no.
Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez lamented that, quote, working people want leaders whose word means something.
Yeah, words mean something, like a guy who didn't give free drinks and didn't and lied about raising minimum wage to $30 in New York City and made a lot of rich people leave New York and made a lot of business owners want to leave New York. Yeah, that's totally what it is.
And for Congressman Greg Casar, the leader of the Progressive Caucus on Capitol Hill, quote, accepting nothing but a pinky promise from Republicans isn't a compromise, it's capitulation. Meanwhile, over on MSNBC's The Weekend, co-anchor Antonia Hilton and guest Dean Obeidallah channeled the frustration many Democratic voters, are surely feeling.
In the wake of the election on Tuesday, the president made remarks saying basically, wow, Republicans are being harmed by all of this, acknowledging that he was on his back foot. And now here he is winning again? How did he do it?
The Democrats, I don't understand how a Democratic senator goes, wow, we won really big. Let me cave now. I don't understand. That makes no sense.
Well, it's simple, because their voters and their states were also suffering. It is not a one-party thing for the government shutdown to affect people. This affects voters across both of them. That's why they caved in, because their people were suffering, and they chose not to destroy them over some bullshit party politics.
To be clear, polls had consistently showed more voters blamed Trump and the GOP for the shutdown than Democrats. And a Kaiser Family Foundation poll just last week showed 74% of Americans, 74%, wanted the Obamacare subsidies extended. How do you take those cards and lose? How do you come off an election where fighters have been rewarded and decide to surrender instead? How do you create a confrontation with a president who your voters loathe and then hand him a win? It's enormously frustrating for liberal Americans. That's why so many voters believe something about this Democratic Party has to change.
Yep. And what they want is more socialism and more authoritarian policies. Yeah, that's totally what the people want. Yeah. So there's a high likelihood you're gonna get AOC and Gavin Newsom or some bullshit ticket like that. You know, more government intervention, more government policy, more government interference in your average life, more taxes for the wealthy, the middle class, and everyone else.
It might be more primary challenges from progressives. It might be more grassroots action. It might be more willingness to fight. It might be all of the above. But things can't go on like this. Gavin Newsom had it right. Pathetic.
Well, the silver lining, Niall, is that we'll get to do this again in 2.5 months.
Yes, exactly.
So we can have this exact fighting conversation. Look, I understand why, from a progressive or left-wing standpoint, the dissatisfaction is certainly palpable, particularly after Democrats received a mandate of some sort with very, very favorable election results that might have strengthened their resolve to go on. Obviously, I disagree with having the fight over these issues, but given the Democratic Party's policy priorities and the policy priorities of progressive people, I think it did make sense to continue to hold out. So that speaks to really a cowardly leadership. Now, I know Schumer did not join.
Yeah, cowardly leadership. Shut the whole government down when you don't get what you want. Yeah, total fuckingly. Yeah, totally. And that's the thing. The worst part is that they accepted their pay during the government shutdown. Because if they at least were going in the negatives, at least the American people were made sure that not only is the government shut down, but also the senators aren't being paid during the shutdown and losing money. But because they were, I don't give a shit. I don't give a shit. They needed to cave in. Like, at least you should have shown you were willing to lose money in a government shutdown.
join with the
Right.
8, but Ro Khanna's blaming him, and probably he quietly signaled for them to go ahead and do this now while he can maintain the pretense of objecting.
I think
Is
that's
that
the
not
widespread
case?
suspicion. Absolutely, the widespread suspicion.
Yeah, it speaks to, again, a leadership that is out of touch with what not the entire party wants, because there are a lot of moderates in the party, but the most energized faction right now of the Democratic coalition wants to fight Trump on these issues that, as you point out, speak to certain Democratic polling strengths and speak to the fact that they won the election. So I was as surprised as anyone else to say, oh, really, today's the day we're calling an end to this thing. It's music to my ears, but I suppose I don't care either way. The government can remain shut down, and we're going to have to hire everyone back, even all of them.
Well, this is the thing.
Sad.
So Oh, Robbie. So two points. Firstly, on the moderates thing, it is worth noting that a number of moderates voted against, like did not cave on this. I mean, people like Mark Warner is not some flaming liberal. John Ossoff in Georgia.
I mean, they're all flaming liberals.
Well, they're all big government liberals to you, but I mean, this is not the progressive wing of the Democratic Party only that was holding out. They were undercut by people like Fetterman, which is predictable.
Hey. Fetterman is in control of a swing state. Hey, he did the correct choice. Don't shit on my boy. He literally is the coolest Democrat on your side, and it's not even close. It's not even close.
But also like people like Tim Kaine. To your point though about Tim Kaine.
I just always say that.
Oh, do you?
Because he was the vice presidential candidate, most forgettable vice president.
He was quite forgettable, as it happens.
Yes.
But the point about the federal government workers is, like, Tim Kaine is now trying to use the return of the federal government workers as a kind of fig leaf for doing this deal, having previously supported the shutdown. The reason the federal workers aren't getting paid is because you supported the shutdown in the first place. And from the Democratic perspective, it was supported because this issue of the healthcare and the subsidies was considered so important. So from someone like Tim Kaine's angle, he's picked this fight, has abandoned the principle that was causing the fight, and is now saying, oh, well, we've got things back for federal workers. The federal workers wouldn't have been harmed if you'd never had the shutdown in the first place.
Right.
The point of the shutdown was to try to win the healthcare concession.
But I guess to play devil's advocate, how was there any universe in which they actually win this fight? Because the Republicans are happy to have the government shut down for as long as possible. They're not. You can't negotiate with the party if they're unified against Trump. Now, probably the counter argument is that Trump himself, a mercurial figure who is actually not like a Paul Ryan type person on any of these issues, might have eventually instructed them to cave, probably.
No. Instructed them to end the filibuster, the nuclear option. That would have been the best choice.
Now, I don't know that that's a likely outcome. The Republicans might have there's nothing you can do. They're more Republicans, and they're happy to just have the government shut down. Yep. And so it falls to Democrats to eventually give in or just have a permanent government shutdown.
I think that the Democrats, I do recognize that dynamic, but I think the Democrats could have held out at least for the compromise that they themselves proposed last week, which was a 1-year extension on the subsidies, not for them to be extended in perpetuity, but to have a 1-year extension, because there are some Republicans who are wary of these subsidies being taken away because they would hurt their own constituents. Yeah. So I think that's an issue as well.
Well, next up, Axios is reporting that up-and-coming Democrat James Tallarico.
Yep. Also, here's a little weird thing. You see how these guys cross their legs? Apparently, it's to show their silly socks. Like, I'm just gonna say it. This is weird as fuck. But yeah, absolute shit. They should have ended the government shutdown a long time ago, and the Democrats were willing to hurt their own people to do it. But yeah, that's all.